Now, the course and distribution of facial nerve. We can see there are two routes. One is the medial, that is motor route, another is the sensory. These two routes, they are going forward and laterally. This is the lateral view. So here I am drawing another one view from the above. So medially motor, laterally sensory. These two routes, they proceed forward and laterally. Here lies this internal acoustic meatus. These two routes unite, enter into this internal acoustic meatus along with the vestibulocochlear nerve and labyrinthine artery. So here they are going forward and laterally. These two routes unite within that internal acoustic meatus at the bottom of that internal acoustic meatus, just before coming out from that internal acoustic meatus. After coming out from that internal acoustic meatus, the facial nerve enter into the facial canal. It is a bony canal. You can see first it is going forward. So here it is going first forward. In this zone, basically, there is the inner ear, vestibule of the inner ear. So here it is going above the vestibule of the inner ear. After reaching at that medial wall of the middle ear, it make a sharp turn. Here you can see this one. This sharp turn, this is known as the external genu of the facial nerve, and it shows a asymmetric dilatation here due to the accumulation of pseudo-unipolar neuron of sensory nerves, which receives that taste sensation and general sensation from the concha. Those cell bodies are present in the geniculate ganglia. That's why it is dilated, and this zone is known as the geniculate ganglia. This part of that facial nerve within the facial canal is known as the labyrinthine part. So first it enters into the internal acoustic meatus. It is coming out from there. It first having a part above the vestibule of the inner ear. In this zone, it is above the vestibule of the inner ear. Then it turns backward along with the medial wall of the middle ear. Here we can, as if we are looking from the lateral side, show here that facial canal is going backward along with the medial wall of the middle ear. It goes backward and downward. This part is known as the tympanic part. It is labyrinthine, then tympanic. The middle ear, you can consider this as the middle ear. Suppose this is a hexagonal thing, a box like, matchbox like. So if it is a middle ear, if we open this, so that is the medial wall of the middle ear. Here lies the promontory, and above this, in this zone, there lies the bulging of the lateral semicircular canal. The facial canal is going through this. Then it goes on the back side. So that means in the posterior part. That means here into the back. This part is known as the mastoid part. So here it is coming downwards. up to the stylomastoid foramen, through which it is coming out from that bone, going outside like this. So again I am repeating, there are two roots, motor and sensory, both going forward and laterally, enters into the internal acoustic meatus. They unite within that canal. Here it is related with the vestibulocochlear nerve. After coming out, the facial nerve enters into the bony facial canal, which having three parts: labyrinthine part, tympanic part, mastoid part. In the labyrinthine part, it is above the vestibule of the inner ear. In the tympanic part, it is related to the medial wall and the posterior wall of the, this is anterior, it is posterior wall of the middle ear. It is coming downwards and it will exit through that stylomastoid foramen. After coming out from the stylomastoid foramen, it just enter, it is just coming through that, it is styloid process, mastoid. So it is the stylomastoid foramen. So it is coming out through this stylomastoid foramen. Then basically it goes above this or lateral to that styloid process, and then it enters within the substance of the parotid gland. Here lies the substance of the parotid gland, the duct. This is the substance of the parotid gland. So it enters into the substance of the parotid gland. Here it divides into two, zygomaticotemporal and zygomaticofacial branch. The zygomaticotemporal again divides into two, temporal branch and zygomatic branch. Temporal branch supplying these muscles, upper half of the orbicularis oris, frontal belly of occipito frontalis, and this corrugator superciliary. Lower part of the orbicularis oculi is supplied by the zygomatic branch. Now remaining part is again divided into buccal, then marginal mandibular and cervical. Buccal divided into superficial and deep. Deep again divided into upper buccal and lower buccal, going above and below that parotid duct, and it is going to supply this. It is going to supply this zone, and this is that marginal mandibular going to supply this muscle, and the cervical branch going to supply the platysma. So these are the terminal branches of the facial nerve at the face. They are coming out from the anterior border of the parotid gland, just like the leg of the goose. So five, say, temporal, zygomatic, buccal, marginal mandibular, cervical. That's why it is known as the pes anserinus, as it looks like the leg of the goose. Now here, before supplying these branches, before dividing, it gives few branches. As posterior auricular, it is going to supply the occipital belly of occipitofrontalis. It is the posterior belly of digastric, supplied by this styloid process. The stylohyoid muscle is supplied by the facial nerve. These branches are drawn by the blue color, indicating they are coming from the motor nucleus of the facial nerve. That means all these structures are derived from the second branchial arch. So they are special visceral efferent fiber. Okay. So these are the course, root and terminal branches of that facial nerve. Now come to the earlier one. Now just what I have drawn that color, it goes like this, encircling that sixth. It is coming through that motor root, it is coming out like this and going to supply all the structures of the fish. And here it is also giving one branch at the region of the pyramidal eminence to the stapedius. Here lies the muscle stapedius. It supplies the stapedius muscle. That stapedius is also developed from the second branchial arch. That is another branch. Now, there are few communication, but there is also one branch, that is that chorda tympani. Chorda tympani is coming just 6 centimeter above this stylomastoid foramen. It is coming above like this. Basically, the chorda tympani is, suppose it is the posterior wall. Chorda tympani, it goes through the lateral wall. Suppose I am opening the lateral wall. It goes through the lateral wall of the middle ear. It enters into the middle ear through the posterior canaliculi. It is very intimately related with that. Suppose here lies that tympanic membrane. It is the medial wall of the tympanic membrane. It goes in between the mucous membrane and the fibrous part of that tympanic membrane. Even it goes medial to the handle of the malleus. That means handle of malleus is lateral to that nerve, and it is very intimately related here. So any damage can damage this, any damage of that tympanic membrane can damage this chorda tympani nerve. Then it goes anteriorly, it is coming out through the anterior canaliculi. So I am drawing this thing. So it is going like this. So it is coming out anteriorly through the anterior canaliculi. There it joins with another one nerve, which is a branch of the trigeminal nerve. Say this is the branch of the trigeminal. That is the lingual nerve. That lingual nerve is for carrying the general sensation from the tongue through this branch of the trigeminal. But here that chorda tympani joins with this, and the chorda tympani carries the secretomotor fiber, and also it carries the fiber for the taste sensation. First, the secretomotor. Say that secretomotor fiber from this through the sensory root, it comes like this. It goes through that chorda tympani. Now it is handed over going through the lingual. Then here lies one ganglia, that is the submandibular ganglia. This fiber enters into this, then it relay here. That means a second order neuron starts here. It supply here that submandibular salivary gland, and it also supply another gland here, that is the sublingual. These are the postganglionic fiber, postganglionic secretomotor fiber. So here lies this primary neuron for that preganglionic fiber. Here lies the postganglionic supplying submandibular and sublingual. Here lies the tongue. From the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, except this valid papilla, taste sensation is carried first by this, the fiber first passes through that lingual nerve, then they will travel through this chorda tympani, then they ascend above. Their cell body is situated here. So this is the peripheral part of their fiber, and central neuron travel through this, through the sensory route, and terminate into the nucleus tractus solitarius. So this is that chorda tympani branch, which carries two fiber, secretomotor and taste carrying fiber from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue, except the valid papilla. So this is another branch. Now, what are the important communications here? Here actually from that geniculate ganglia, G for G, so the greater petrosal nerve coming out through this, and that greater petrosal nerve leave this part through a hiatus for this nerve in the tegmen tympani, and it proceeds towards the foramen lacerum. So you know, just below the foramen lacerum, here lies that internal carotid artery, and that surrounding the internal carotid, here lies sympathetic plexus. From that plexus, deep petrosal nerve arises. So that greater petrosal and deep petrosal. So the greater petrosal, basically it carries again a secretomotor fiber. Say here I am taking it as another nucleus, say the lacrimator nucleus. So from that lacrimator nucleus, another fiber, same secretomotor fiber, as the target is different, that's why I have drawn a different nucleus. It is coming through that, it passes through this. So it is the pterygoid canal, and now these two nerves, that means the greater petrosal and deep petrosal, both the nerve unite to form the nerve of the pterygoid canal. That nerve of the pterygoid canal contains two fiber. One is the secretomotor fiber and another is the sympathetic fiber. So this nerve of the pterygoid canal coming out, and here after coming out you'll find that one ganglia is hanging from another one nerve of the trigeminal nerve, that is the maxillary nerve. From the maxillary nerve, that pterygopalatine ganglia is basically, it is hanging from there. Now that secretomotor fiber will relay here, and a second order neuron will start from here. The target is the lacrimal gland. It first ascends through this another root of that ganglia and enters into the maxillary nerve. Then the maxillary nerve is having that one branch, that is the zygomatic branch. Zygomatic is again divided into zygomaticofacial and zygomaticotemporal. And these nerves ascend through this pathway. Here is another one branch of the trigeminal, that is the lacrimal nerve is there. So now this fiber is handed over to the lacrimal nerve up to the lacrimal gland for lacrimation. This is the lacrimal nerve. The sympathetic fiber will not relay here. It will goes without any relay, and it will also supply the lacrimal gland. So see, fibers for lacrimation coming from the lacrimated nucleus, coming through the sensory route, then at that geniculate ganglia through the Getter petrosal, it is coming out mixed with the deep petrosal from the nerve of the pterygoid canal. It is the pterygoid canal, and then it enters into the pterygopalatine ganglia, and without here it makes a relay, and second order neuron starts, and that will supply the lacrimal gland. There is many other second order neuron. One is here to supply the nasal cavity, another two are there, that is the greater petrosal, greater palatine, and another is the lesser palatine. Actually here lies the palate, soft palate is the hard palate, here lies the nose. So see, from this ganglia it is supplying the lacrimal gland, nasal cavity, here that soft palate. So any irritation of this gland can lead to secretion, lacrimation, then nasal secretion, secretion in the soft palate glands. In hay fever, it happens like this. That's why in hay fever, actually it irritates this ganglia and causes secretion from all these structures. That's why this ganglia is known as the ganglia for the hay fever. Taste sensation from this soft palate. So the green. So taste sensation from this soft palate is also carried by this lesser palatine nerve, and without relay here, because it will relay into the geniculate ganglia. It will also passes through that nerve of the pterygoid canal, then greater petrosal, and basically the cell body is there. Their central process which passes through the sensory route and enter into the nucleus tractus solitarius, carrying the taste from the soft palate. So this is basically a communication. Another important communication is from the concha, actually a vagus nerve carrying sensation, and it communicate here with the facial, and that is a general somatic afferent fiber. It carries the sensation. Again the cell body is here, pseudo-unipolar. Another process of this will passes through the sensory route, and it will enter into the upper part of the spinal nucleus of the trigeminal. So by this, the general sensation from the concha of the auricle is carried like this. So by this time, you have realized that these are the branches, these are important communication, and this is the different fibers of the facial nerve. Now comes to the applied portion of the facial nerve. So first starts from this part. What happens if there is any damage in this segment, say in the parotid gland? So all the muscles supplied in this part will be paralyzed. Usually what happens is that one of the important cause of that lower motor facial palsy is the Bell's palsy. It is mainly idiopathic, but some says it due to some viral etiology is there for that lower motor facial palsy. Now, what happens in that case? First, try to find out. Suppose this is the diagrammatic picture of a face. Suppose this zone, that is the right side, is being paralyzed. So what will happen? The first you will find that face will deviate to the left side. Next you will find that the tip of the nose is also be deviate to this side due to the pull from this sided muscle. This side is paralyzed to pull from this side, causing these things. Then if we find that eyelid, in this side the patient can able to close even the eyelid, but opposite side will be unable. The palpebral fissure will be widened. Patient can even wrinkle the eyebrow and the forehead muscle on the sound side, but here it will be flattened because the frontal belly is paralyzed. Orbicularis oculi is paralyzed. That's why patient will be unable to close the eye. If the patient is asked to close the eye, what will happen usually? Sometimes what happens, the eyeball itself rotate upward to close the entry of the light or to in an attempt to cover the cornea. So that rotation, upward rotation of the eyeball, that event is known as the Bell's phenomena. So what is Bell's phenomena? In attempt to closing the eye, the eyeball itself rotated upward instead of falling off that upper eyelid. That is known as the Bell's phenomenon. Another thing is that as the lower lid is also bit lax, here lies the puncta, which receives the that secretion from the lacrimal gland, that is the tear. So the tear is not going through the proper route, it is coming out over the cheek, known as the epiphora. Here the nasolabial fold is okay, but in that side there is no that fold because that zygomaticus major minor all are paralyzed here, and that alic nasi is also paralyzed. The angle of the mouth is also going downwards due to loss of the pull from this side, and the person is also unable to completely close the mouth. So saliva is also dribbling through this. As the vaccinator is paralyzed, so the food bolus may present in between in the vestibule of the mouth, and patient can also be unable to blow due to the paralysis of this vaccinator. So these are the features of the Bell's palsy or lower motor nerve lesion, facial nerve lesion. What is lower motor and what is upper motor, I'll discuss later. Okay, so that is the Bell's palsy or lower motor facial nerve palsy. If the damage is here or in there, if the lesion is above than this, suppose above than this, then what will happen? So that will be plus feature. That means if cut is here, so what will happen? The facial palsy will be there, plus there will be loss of the function of those fibers present in that chorda tympani nerve. So taste sensation from the anterior two-thirds of the tongue will be lost. Saliva secretion from this gland will be lost, so there will be less saliva secretion. And also that sensation from that concha of the ear will also be lost. Now if the cut is above this, that means now the nerve to stapedius is also paralyzed. So there will be plus, this thing will be there, plus what will happen? The effect of loss of this function of stapedius will be seen. What is that? Perception of more sound, that is known as the hyperacusis, due to loss of the or damage of the function of the nerve to stapedius. So as we proceed above, we will find the lower loss is there, but the loss is increasing. When the loss is above this, above the geniculate ganglia, then again the function of that fiber present in the pterygoid canal, the greater petrosal, that will be damaged. So now secretion from that lacrimal gland will be lost. So no lacrimation and no secretion from the nose or no taste sensation from this zone. If we again further, if the damage is over here, so in this zone, not only the facial nerve, also vestibulocochlear is damaged. So hearing loss will be also there. Plus those things. Now, if the damage even in that pons here, so there will be motor paralysis, lower motor neuron lesion. So there will be the ipsilateral. Suppose if this is that pons, suppose in this side that facial nucleus is damaged, suppose here lies the infected area, so this fiber is being damaged, and also that fiber will coming downwards, that is the corticospinal fiber will also be damaged. That corticospinal fiber will decussate in the lower part. So what will be the effect of that? The ipsilateral facial nerve palsy, lower motor facial nerve palsy. So facial nerve palsy, ipsilateral, and contralateral hemiplegia. That means paralysis of the half of the body. That is known as the Millard-Gubler syndrome. Now, sometime one thing happened is known as the crocodile tear syndrome. What is that? Suppose if there is any damage in this zone. Now the secretomotor fiber during regeneration, suppose the secretomotor fiber which has to go to the this up to the this nucleus, that is the submandibular nucleus. So instead of going that during regeneration, it passes through this pathway and enter into the pterygopalatine ganglia. So in that case, what will the effect of that during eating? Instead of salivation, salivation is going, but also through this fiber, some lacrimation is also happening, paroxysmal. That is known as the crocodile tear syndrome. Another applied is known as the Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. What is that? Actually, in Ramsay-Hunt syndrome, we'll find that it is actually caused by that herpes zoster virus. The virus actually resides in this area, in the geniculate ganglia. Its main effect, you'll find that there is that blister of that herpes virus in that concha zone. Along with that, there will be lower motor facial palsy, loss of taste sensation, a bit loss of this secretion of the saliva. But as the saliva is also secreted from the parotid, so effect will be not so prominent, and also hyperacusis will be there. So these are the features of the Ramsay-Hunt syndrome. Now, one of the important thing I want to discuss is that upper motor and lower motor facial palsy. What is that? So from that nucleus, the whole thing is the lower motor, even that nucleus. Upper motor means something which is above this. So above this there is cortex. So let me draw that. First, I am drawing a face. upper part and lower part. Suppose this is the motor nucleus of the facial nerve on both sides. The upper part of the drawing is upper part of this nucleus is supplying this here and lower part here. Same on this side. Simple. So if there is any damage in this part, so there will be damage of the whole this side. Okay. Now, so this is the motor nucleus, and all these things is the lower motor. So anything here, it is the lower motor. Remember, it is the lower motor neuron. Even that neuron which is resides in the pons, that is also a lower motor neuron. Now, suppose this is the cortex. Here lies the cell body of the upper motor. What is happening that usually that neuron or that nucleuses are receiving from the opposite side. So here it is receiving from the opposite side two things. Same thing should be here. So now it is clear that this nucleus receiving from this side, this receiving this side. One peculiarity for the facial nerve is that the upper part of the nucleus, which is supplying the upper part of the face, it will receive a extra thing. That means there will be a extra fiber which is supplying here. It is also this part. So the upper part of the nucleus receives innervation from both sides. So if there is any damage, say in this part, so total this part is damaged, so what will be the effect of that? In that case, in this side you will find that upper part is getting from there, okay, no problem. Lower part is getting from opposite side, so this side will be okay in that case. But in this side, what will be the effect? In the upper part, yes, it is getting another supply from the same side, so no problem in the upper part. But for the lower part, it is getting only fiber from this side. So as this is not coming, so the lower half of this side will be paralyzed. This is the upper motor neuron type of lesion, where the lesion is above the facial nerve nucleus, and in that case the person will be able to raise or the eyebrow on this side, and there will be wrinkle on the forehead. So that is the upper motor neuron lesion. Thank you.